Watch this. No way!
We're very lucky to be joined by Ian Wright this afternoon, who caddied for Seve many moons ago. And there's a few good stories, and I love live golf, but I also think there's some many great stories to share from yesteryear. So if you feel like you want to maybe orientate your chairs at 90 degrees and glance across and listen and watch the golf, whatever, we'd be really appreciative, and it'd be a great way to share in some of Ian's stories, perhaps. But don't feel under any major pressure.
No, we'd like you to still be relaxed and watch the
Absolutely.
golf, of course. But I'm sure you can hear us and have a laugh.
Hopefully it's a better soundtrack than live golf and whatever else nonsense we've already heard on the broadcast. So I'm joined by Dan, by the way.
Thank you, Sam. I mean, I'm really excited about this. Ian Wright caddied for Seve in the 1988 Open at Lytham. His third Open Championship win, his fifth major. Not many people can say. In fact, you are the last surviving caddy, aren't you, of those who actually caddied for Seve for a major win. Is that right, Ian?
I believe Peter's still going quite well. He's made a recovery, but he's done very well, and he's bounced back. And I saw him at the Seniors Open, what would it be, 18 months ago, and he was fine then.
Right, that's good
But there
news.
ain't many of us left.
No.
We should probably introduce ourselves a little bit. By the way, my name's Sam Williams. I run a golf podcast called Cookie Jar Golf, but the benefits of running a podcast is it is entirely edited, and you're in your safe haven of being able to select what goes out on air. So for me, doing it under the gun live is a bit of pressure, but very much looking forward to it. Dan, however, as you'll tell by his greying beard, has got a lot more experience in this industry.
Thank you. I am considerably older than you, Sam, but I aspire to be you. But I'm really excited about this. I'm a huge Seve Ballesteros fan, as I'm sure many of us are. And obviously, St Andrews is a place that's synonymous with Seve because of his exploits here in 1984. And, you know, that Open win that Ian caddied for Seve in 1988. And we'll come on to that. But it's... so, Ian... How did you get started as a caddy? Because it was a different start to your career, wasn't it? You were doing something very different before, weren't you?
Yes, I was an insurance man. But what happened was I used to play golf regularly on the Wednesday, and I used to play with two guys, Barry Stevens and Phil Harrison, in the Wednesday Alliance. Anyway, came to the qualifying for the car care, and Barry Stevens said, "Oh, you can come and caddy for me round there." I said, "Am I volunteering?" He says, "No, I'm telling you." So at 5:30 on the morning of the tournament, he picks me up. Anyway, he failed to qualify. He missed the cut by 2 shots. As I'm putting the clubs away in the car park and going to go for my dinner, Phil Harrison turns up and says, "Hey, what you doing here?" I says, "Well, Barry had me caddying for him." I said, "He's done no good." He says, "Right, you can come round with me now." He says, "Because I have no idea about the course and you can sort of guide me round." So fortunately, I guided him round quite well because he finished -2 and qualified. But on that, he said, "Oh, you can't caddy in the tournament for me because I'm already pre-booked, but I've arranged for you to work for a guy called Donald Sterling." Now, if anybody knows Donald Sterling, I would describe him as the Southermouth of Yorkshire. So anyway, I got tied up with him and managed to make all 4 days caddying in the car care. And I got the vast sum of £84. So I thought, oh, this is an easy life. While I'm there, I met a guy called Roy Holland, who was Brian Waits' caddy. And he said to me, "Look, I'm looking for a caddy for Royal St George's." I said, "Where the hell's that?" He said, "Down south." That's how much I knew about golf courses and you know, where they were. So anyway, he said, "Look, he'll take you on, he'll pay you a weekly wage, and if you go down, he'll teach you a bit about caddying as well." So anyway, I rang the wife of then and said, "Look, I think I'll take up caddying."
How many have there been, Ian, just for the record?
Pardon?
Wives?
2 I've had.
Oh, okay.
1 English, 1 Chinese. And got rid of them both. First one very expensively, but that's by the by. Anyway, I went down to Royal St George's, where I caddied for him, and he paid me £112. And I thought, Christ, that must be good, me, because that's 2 lots of wages already. Now, while I was there again, the guy that really instigated my career, Longfellow, David Jones, the Irishman, great guy, fantastic guy. And he said to me, look, I hear you're new at the game, but what I'll do is I want to caddy for the rest of the year. Will you come and work for me, and I'll teach you all about caddying? And, well, I never looked back. I decided to take the job. He paid me a weekly wage, and believe it or not, I never missed a single cut with him. So I started to get the name Lucky Wright, thanks to Andy Prodger, who you might have heard of. And that's where it went. And then at the end of that year, David said, I think it's best that I don't take you next year, because he says, I'm getting into course design and a few other things, and I don't think I'll be around every tournament. But I've had a word with Brian Marchbank. Now, so I said, OK. So he said, he's going to ring you for the start of the year, and he'll tell you the deal you're on. I said, fair enough. So that's how it started. So I got out there for the start of the year, and David Jones came up to me and said, look, I want you to do a pacings book. Now, you young lads who have no idea about a pacings book, because modern technology is taking over.
Changed the game, though, didn't it? The yardage books. Changed it.
I'm to blame.
I know.
And what happened was I started doing these pacing books. Now, if you've seen anything like my drawing on a piece of paper and just looking at these shapes, they weren't a pretty sight. But I had the sprinkler next to the bunker, and I pasted it to the front of the greens. And these books took off. Within 3 weeks, I had 36 players asking me for these pacings books. So it got to the end of that season, and fortunately, working for Brian, we managed to win a tournament on the way, one of these crazy tournaments. Now, I can't remember the title of the tournament.
It wasn't the Wang 4 Stars, was it?
No, that wasn't it. It was something like that, but it wasn't. It was the one where your birdies and bogeys and everything counted.
It was at Royal Mid Surrey, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think I was there, actually, which shows how old I am.
Correct. And we managed to win that somehow. So that was my first taste of success. Anyway, over the winter, I decided to design a sort of proper little book, the first ever yardage book on the European tour. So I got it all set up, and halfway through the year, the European tour came to me and said, look, we're having problems, he said, because the pros are marking sprinklers with T-pegs, metal things, all sorts. Can you put spots on the fairways? We'll allow you 4 spots down the centre of par 4s and 5 spots down the centre of par 5s. So I said, OK. So that's how eventually the first yardage book came about, with spots. And I'm the guy to blame for that as well. I get a lot of blame for everything.
How do you feel about the science in the game now? Because obviously, many years have moved on now, and we've got players in the game like Bryson, where it's sort of, he's almost known as the scientist, and there's this whole thing around distance and precision.
I don't mind the thought of distances. What I object to is all the peripheral stuff in the book, and particularly greens books. Why do you need a greens book? If you can't read greens, what are you doing playing golf?
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's my theory on that one. And good caddies, I know myself, I went to York and spoke to the agronomist at York, and he gave me a 3-day lesson on how to read greens, how to read grain, which is another important thing. And I sort of developed my skills through asking other people who had the knowledge. And I felt it benefited me, particularly later on in my caddying career, as you'll find out as we go along.
How does that sort of, like, you obviously honed a craft there, Ian, around being a caddy and massively investing, and there's a lot of people that do that today, and I don't think still do it. You know, how does investing in that craft then come through to working with Seve eventually? Like, how does that chapter of events unfold?
I think it's a case of, with me doing the books, I was obviously well known. The face was there every week. And I was obviously, what happened was, I was doing the yardage books and I was caddying for different players every week. I mean, so I'm reputedly 1,700 different players I've worked for in my career altogether.
Is that why you're known as Two Bags?
Now, that's the story isn't quite as true as what it's reported, I believe. How I got the title 2 bags was at the tour school, and there was some caddies on the veranda. What happened was, I was caddying for one guy, and the caddy for the other guy didn't turn up or was late. So I said, OK, I'll take your bag down to the first tee. Well, of course, I'm carrying one and pushing one, and the lads on the top all shouted down 2 bags. And that's how it actually started.
And am I right in thinking that 1984 here, when Seve won, was your first Open or your first Open at St Andrews?
Yes, that was my first Open at St Andrews, but I did do the yardage books and that for the different tournaments here, and I also the Dunhill Cups, of course.
And you had even though your man Brian Marchbank didn't make the cut in '84, you did have one special moment, didn't you?
Yes, we birdied the road hole on our first round and brought the house down on the road hole. So that was a special moment for us. Yes.
So how did the approach? Obviously, you've been caddying for David Jones and Brian Marchbank, who were good players, but I suppose what might be described as journeymen. And then to get the approach from somebody like Seve, who was absolutely at the top of the game. How did that come about, in 1988?
Well, I used to work for the Argentinian team. Now, he's where we were at the Dunhill Cup. And I caddied for a complete unknown called a Dan Sauer. Couldn't speak English, had never left Argentina, and had never played links golf in his life, and had never, done anything. So Vincent Fernandez, who I had worked for and finished second a couple of times with him and a few other results, said, look, I need you to work with a Dan Sauer. But he said, I've got bad news for you. We're drawn against England. And of course, you knew at that time, Argentina, England, there was the problems. So I became Mr. Popular as a caddy there. But then I was even more unpopular because Pete Coleman lost a few £1,000s by backing against Argentina.
And how did Argentina get on that year? Did they?
We won 2-1 the first match against England, and then we actually got beat the second round. But we were quite happy to beat England, believe me.
So Vicente Fernandez was a big pal of Seve's, wasn't he? He was somebody who had Seve's ear, and obviously, was he the person who put in the recommendation to Seve?
Yes, and that's where it came from. We were down in Spain. I was caddying for then Magnus Persson, who's called Magnus at Levy Persson now and plays on the seniors. I was working for Magnus. I was really well looked after by the Swedish Saab team. But then just stood talking with Pete Coleman and Davy Musgrove, actually, who's passed away, of course, who was Sandy's caddy, and that both been Seve's caddy. And all of a sudden, there's a tap on my shoulder, and it's Gino, and he says, look, Seve's looking for a new caddy for the start of next year. He said, and I've recommended you. I've told him you're the perfect guy for him. I says, well, were you drunk again or what? So anyway, he said, he needs to talk to you. Can you arrange to talk to him? Well, being a straightforward, honest guy, I said, look, I'll have to talk to Magnus first. I can't just, go and talk to Seve and not. Otherwise, it's going to cause all sorts of ructions with Magnus, I said. He said, that's the right way to do it. So anyway, I spoke with Magnus that night. Said, look, Seve wants to talk to me about next year. I said, how do you feel about it? Well, I didn't need to get an answer because I watched his face, unfortunately, and his face dropped. He said, well, I can't stop you, can I? And I don't think I should stop you. He said he was a gentleman about it, but we had a great relationship. We'd been together a year and a half or so, and we were having top 10 results. The form was coming good, everything. So it was a bit stressful.
That's quite hard. I can relate to that. That would be really hard. You feel like you're letting one person down.
I did.
It's really hard not to put yourself first, actually.
Yeah.
You want to, you're a people pleaser, you're supporting people there, and that must be really difficult.
Yeah, so I went and talked with Seve anyway, and he explained, I want you to start next year. I'll get in touch with you as soon as I'm ready, coming back from the States. So I just left it at that. At that, Pete Pete Coleman and Davy Musgrove jumped in. He says, do you realise what you're doing? You're putting your life on the line now.
Yeah.
You know, you don't realise what you're letting yourself in for and all this. They give me all the stories about what would happen and about some of the, probably abuse would be a good word, that I was going to receive.
He was a tough guy to work for, wasn't he? I mean,
he was a very tough guy.
Yeah.
He demanded, literally, you had to give 150% because you're giving 100% effort on your part, but you also, he had the problem of it drift away sort of thing. So you're working 50% or maybe 30% of his time as well, because he just goes into his bubble, you know, and you have to bring him out the bubble. I found out later there's ways of, you know, coaxing him and cajoling him.
We always remember him for the triumph, but I suspect there's disaster along the way, isn't there?
Oh, there's a few disasters.
Up here. Was it the Monte Carlo Open or something we were talking about?
Yeah, the Monte Carlo Open.
We never remember Seve for these ones. It's the air shots that we always forget.
Well, there's the Monte Carlo Open. We were coming nicely into contention. I'm thinking, okay, and we've got the short par 4. So I was quite adamant it was an easy 3-wood for him. So the argument starts a little bit. Anyway, he decides to go with a 3-wood, and of course, what happens? Snap hook, straight into bushes by the side of the green. So you can imagine the abuse that followed then. That's your fault. You picked the club. Why'd you let me do it? All that. And I think we finished 7th or 4th or something. So that was the first taste of getting the voice, let's say, in my ear.
But you did.
But then I learned you've got to have us 2 ears. One with cotton wool in, so you can't hear him, and the other one that you could hear him if he was talking sensible.
So you did, what, 3 tournaments with Seve before you arrived at Lytham in 1988. And obviously Lytham had a special place in Seve's heart and Seve's story, because that's where he first won his first Open in 79. Did you get a sense that he was really coming into some form into that, and did you really feel you were going to have a chance that week?
I think there's something I should tell you though, and I think we just skipped a little bit there. When I first went to work for him at Wentworth, he tells me 9 o'clock outside the clubhouse, plonks the bag down, simple rules, no number 3 golf balls in the bag at all. You'll be sacked if there's any number 3. I didn't get into a discussion over that. I just immediately went to the locker room, checked all the Titleist balls that had been put in the locker, threw all the 3s away quickly, realising I had that, and then checked the bag, and we shot off. Now, Ken Brown started about an hour ahead of us with Laughing Boy, so we charge off, and he tested me, and I mean, he ran me round for 14 holes. Anyway, we've passed Ken Brown after about an hour, and Ken's only on about the 8th, and we've flown by him. And he slows down on the 14th hole. He says, "Bah, gum," he says, "you've done well there, you're pretty fit." "Oh," I said, "am I?" I said, "Yeah, you kept right up with me, and you've kept the pace, and you've done the yardages." He says, "You've done really well there." He says, "Well, how do you train and keep fit?" Well, I hadn't a clue what to say, so I just blurted out, "Sex 3 times a day." Anyway, burst out laughing. He totally relaxed, and that was the start of what I deemed to be a great relationship at that point, because he just sort of melted, and we sort of just clicked. I know it sounds strange to say, but that stupid statement just thrown out of my head from nowhere, and yet it seemed to totally relax him. And we went on to finish 2nd that week, because his short game let him down at 17.
But I think Seve, it's fair to say, having been on that bag, it's almost a blessing and a curse. You've got the most talented golfers, but someone who's pretty unrelenting in terms of his expectations. You suppose you need a really, really good sort of just personal relationship there to weather whatever goes on out there, because we all know it can be 0 or bust with any golfer, let alone Seve, right? So it's crucial, I guess.
Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of people said and described me as a natural caddy. Whether I am or not, I don't know. That's their opinion. And I seem to see things or sense things sometimes before they even happen. Like in France, He stood in the conifer bushes, and the ball's between the two conifer bushes. Now, I wish we had the video of this, because it's still the funniest thing I've ever seen in golf. Because I'm stood to the side, the ball's between the conifers, and this golf club's going up between the branches, round the branches, down, and he's just working out how he's going to hit the ball. Well, this is where I learned never to say no to Seve. Don't do something. I said, no, you can't play that. Just take the drop. We're doing okay. That was it. In we went,
on, Seve, we're doing
in between
all right.
the bushes,
Let's get some
swinging
prize
up and
money.
down. So the next thing, here comes the club. Boing, 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 boing. Misses the ball by a foot. Well, I'm in tears, doubled up. Because can you imagine a club bouncing off a conifer tree and then hitting the ball, missing the ball by a foot? I mean, it was hilarious. Well, I'm in tears, and it must have took me 5 minutes to stop laughing. Anyway, I got the verbals then. He said, I've never had that before. You're the first caddy to ever laugh at me. I said, and if you do that again, I'll be doubled up again. I says, that was hilarious.
But Ian, wasn't he actually... I mean, obviously, Seve is renowned for his touch and his incredible natural ability and his imagination and all that sort of stuff. But actually, he was very meticulous about what he wanted, wasn't he, as well? He was a very detail-orientated golfer.
And plus, he had the vision.
Yeah.
This is the thing I would describe Seve. He had magnificent vision. He could see things. We'd look up there, we'd look under there, we'd look left, we'd look right. And he got me doing it as well. And this is where you learn so much as a caddy again, because you never stop learning as a caddy, no matter who you work for, whatever level. You learn so much, and it benefits your caddying experience, And I learned how to escape from places I'd have never dreamed of escaping from. And it come into bear a few times. I was caddying in a pro-am at Woburn, and this guy's hit it left. And he says, what am I going to do? I said, just take your 8 iron and go straight over that tree there on the left. I says, you'll reach the actual fairway. He said, I can't do that. He says, the hole's over here. I said, just play it over there. Believe me, trust me. And he did. He knocked it over and he was on the fairway. And he said, how did you think of that? I says, well, that's what Seve taught me to do. Teach me to look this way, that way. And actually, it's actually shorter going that way down the hole than going back out sideways.
So let's talk a little bit about Lytham in '88, because that was for all Seve fans, an iconic week.
Yeah.
Obviously you've been on the bag for 3 tournaments beforehand. He had some good finishes. Did he feel really good about going back to Lytham?
Oh yeah. Well, the first thing we should say, he has me there on Sunday with me car. Come and pick me up. We're going to go and play 9 holes practice on Sunday.
Right.
And so I go around to where he's staying, pick him up, and we go at the course, and it's nice and quiet, we think. So we get out. And before we know it, we've got about 1,500 people on a Sunday following us around 9 holes, of course.
But he must have been
And
the absolute height, right? I mean, he must have been the most sought-after golfer to watch at that point, I suppose. It would be quite naive to think no one would be there.
No, that's true. And then he starts. This par 3 first hole, fine. Next hole. 4th hole, do not let me hit anything past this bunker. And I'm thinking, Christ, that's a bit short. He says, I don't want to go past that bunker. If you put me in it, I don't want to be in it.
It's a short 4 that goes back on
It's
itself,
just
isn't it?
it's a straight par 4 down with the OB on the right.
Yes, you're right.
In them days it was.
Yeah.
Might have changed it a bit, but and he says, I don't want to go past this bunker. Of course, what happens? 4th round, what do? Give him a 4 iron off the tee for 200 and something yards, and he actually knocks it in the bunker. So you can imagine what happens there. I got it in the neck. Anyway, that's how disciplined he was. And then when we got round on the back 9, I suddenly felt something and learnt something, because when he come to play we have the par 3, then we play the next par 4, and got on the tee, and all of a sudden he blocks it straight right. And I said, what's going on? He said, you've been swinging great, what's the matter? Oh, this is not my favourite hole. Not my favourite hole. I said, what are you talking about? Oh, I don't like this hole in. Not my favourite hole. Don't talk to me about it. Oh, God. So I thought, OK, I won't talk to you about it. And I did learn that he just hated the hole. And every time he gets on the tee, for some reason, he couldn't visualise. And that's the one where, if you can remember, we pulled it left. We're behind the trees. We had to take a drop back on the tee, and he made an incredible 5 by flying it over the trees and one putt.
He was a very superstitious guy, wasn't he? I mean, he talked about
and that's when you learn that.
Three golf balls.
He did have certain things and certain holes, and I learnt that later on as we went on. Anyway, we got to the Open. Of course, we get the practice rounds. I've got all the bits and pieces done. And first round, how do we start the tournament? Can you remember, guys? Birdie, birdie, birdie. Now, how do you think I'm feeling at that point?
Quite happy?
I'm absolutely crapping myself. I can't make a mistake now, can I? And he went on and had a nice solid start. And then a few guys joined us, and the battle went on over the days till it came down to the last round. And, of course, there was the three of them, Nick Price, Faldo, and us. And we started very, very ordinary, actually. We just played solid, nothing special. Couldn't hold a putt early on till we got to the par 5. And that's where the two of them, Nick Price and Seve, went eagle-eagle. And it's where Faldo took 6 minutes to play his shot. And that finished him. He just went psychologically out the window because he played the worst, whatever it was, chip, run, whatever he tried. And he just wasted his time. And if he'd just walked up and chipped it, I think he'd have been fine. But for some reason, he spent a week deciding what to do.
That final round was played on a Monday because I believe
of the weather,
the Saturday was washed out. But when Seve was, I think, leader or joint leader after round 1, how do you, when you've got a whole day of doing nothing and you've got the thought of winning a third Open Championship?
Doing nothing?
Well, not doing nothing, but like you're not playing golf.
I walked to the course. I walked every hole in the rain before the greenkeeper said, I don't think we're going to play today, Ian.
No, but for Seve, Seve wasn't doing much. He was like,
oh, yeah,
how do you settle him down at that point when he wants to get out there and play?
He comes up and he says, Ian, he rings me, actually he rang me, and he said, look, I'd like to come up and we'll do a bit of putting here. And, of course, he decided he wanted to take some money off me because he knows he can take money off me, putting. So that's what he did. He decided to have putting competitions, and I lost about £3, I think. But I had to pay it as well, by the way, as I'll tell you one other story in the Lytham Trophy. But, he was very meticulous. He sorted everything out and decided that's the way to do it, We'll go this way, we'll go that. And we started, and we did have our odd hiccup. We had one bad hook shot, like I said, one bad pull on another hole into the trees, and he said, make sure you stood out the way. I don't know whether it's going to bounce off the trees or what, and things like that. But he survived. But the one thing I could say was he stayed perfectly calm every hole. And this come across to me, particularly after the second and third rounds, where I thought he'd be really nervous in the third round, but he wasn't. And he was just totally relaxed, and I thought, this is just as I sort of anticipated, because I'd wrote in the local newspaper the week before I caddied for him, I've never seen Seve so relaxed in my life. And I said, I think you ought to back him, lads. And the bookmakers in Redcar took a bit of a pounding, unfortunately.
What do you think was the turning point? Because that was an amazing battle that him and Price had on that last day. Where was the turning point?
Yeah, it was the turn. The others started to drop away. I can't remember all of them that came into contention, but Sandy Lyle was one.
Freddie
Couples came into contention. But then they started to drop away because they were ahead of us, because we were obviously the last group. And as we got to the turn, we started going on the birdie par run, didn't we, with the pair of them. And the battle then was just absolutely something else. And then on 10th hole, the shock came. I'm leaning on the flag talking to Andy Prodger quietly while Seve's lining up the putt, and all of a sudden I hear, "Read this putt."
How often does that happen? How often does Seve ask you to read a
very
putt?
often, then?
He
You
never
always-
asked
yeah.
me if I could read putts. He never asked me to read a putt.
So
And
you
he
know
never
he's
did.
nervous. You know it's like, right, we're
Anyway,
feeling it.
fortunately, it was only a 30-footer and he holed it. So then they went head to head. And as you know, it went on like that. One gave one back, one gained one. And then we got the advantage on 16 when we hit it into inches with a good club for me, I must admit, because he wanted 9 and I talked him into pitching wedge. So we managed to hang on to the one up and we had the little chip on 18, which
Yeah,
to
so
me is
just-
one of the greatest shots to win a major, because that ball was sat down in grass thicker than that. All you could see was half the ball. But I had every faith in him because we'd practiced round the greens all week. We hardly put it on the greens, but we practiced chipping all the way around. And that's something else I learnt about how to treat majors. Think where the ball could finish and what you need to do. If you're around the edges of the greens, check the rough, see which is the best side to even hit it to. And things like that.
Is that some of the prep then paying off, do you think, Ian? So, like, you know, is that almost that moment itself? It really helps having all the knowledge of you going out there on the wet morning when no one's playing.
Yeah.
It's all those hours you don't see. And I think, you know, put
I
the
also
spotlight
had to
on you,
check.
it's a caddy,
I always
you know,
check the blades. You know, have you dropped the blades on the cutters? So then I knew that the greens were going to be that much faster.
Really?
Yeah. You
amazing.
learn all these tricks, you know, as a caddy.
But it's all that stuff that's unsung that's amazing about that player-caddy relationship. Is
Yeah.
you know, almost totally behind the scenes, and also totally dependent on what happens that's so far beyond your control as well. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
you've done everything in terms of preparing, and you know, you've got a lot of skin in the game in terms of how Seve performs. And it comes down to this moment where all you can do is just provide advice, and you just, I suppose, cross your fingers
it's
and hold the bag.
advice, but it's also an art. I call it an art. It's part psychology. It's how you tell him. Don't say it in a straight way. Say it in a roundabout way, I learned.
He's got to agree
And
with
I'd
you,
wait
hasn't he?
for him to
Yeah.
tell me first and tell me what he was thinking and the shape of shot. And then if I didn't really like it, if I
Sort of
felt
nudge
there
him.
was a better way to play it,
Yeah.
I'd then sort of say, well, don't you think with the trouble there, we could play it sort of there sort of thing
Almost
with a
like how
fade or a
parents
draw.
speaks to a child. Isn't it? It's like, do you not think maybe it's probably we've had enough chocolate now?
And just watch the wind. Yesterday it was slightly down. Today we've got it, you know, little things that sometimes he probably might not have been factoring in.
Can I ask you one thing about, you know, you talked about that amazing chip from the hollow left of the green, and it kissed the hole, and it's still hard to understand how it didn't go in.
I still think it's going in.
But
watching
before
it.
that, on the tee,
Oh.
he was asking you a question about how far the bunker is on the right. And just tell me a
Well,
little
he
bit about
wasn't
that
asking
5
me
minutes
how
in your
far
life.
The bunker was on the right. He actually doesn't bother asking me about that because he said, "Where are we going to knock it?" And I said, "Just usual, aimed," because we did it perfect all week down the left half. Anyway, he's obviously getting a bit nervous, which is understandable, and he just cuts it slightly. But then I got the question: did it go in the bunker or didn't it go in the bunker? Well, I couldn't see it, whether it passed the face of the bunker. Normally, you can look at the ball and you see it pass the face of the bunker. And I thought, I didn't see it pass the face of the bunker. But normally, the marshals all go straight to the ball. One marshal will go to the ball, find it for you, you know, and signal they've got it. Well, no marshal moved, did there? So then Seve started. "Ian, where's the ball?" I said, "Hang on, I'm just checking." And I leaned and sort of pretended to be looking to see the marshal move, but he didn't. "Ian, where's the ball?" So, life in my hands, I said, "Oh, it's over the bunker, we're all right." And honest, that was just a straightforward guess because the marshals didn't move, and it was only once we'd walked off the tee that I saw the marshal then walk towards the ball. So I got away with one there, even though... And then the shot to the green, well, it was my decision in a way because I said, look, play for the left half of the green. Take all the trouble out to play on the right. And we were in a bit of a lie, grassy lie, and of course what happens, we get a bit of a flyer. And I'm thinking the wind coming over from left to right would ease the ball back, and unfortunately it didn't. It pitched on the green with it being a fly and just ran into that lie. And as you know now, he made one of the greatest shots to win an Open.
It's amazing insight. I mean, to be there and be on the bag in one of those kind of pressure moments, it's just something I guess everyone can only dream about. It would be remiss, Ian, whilst we've got you here. Obviously, you caddied, I believe, in '89 at the Belfry in the Ryder Cup, a place that's not. I mean, it's just it's Seve.
Yeah, where Seve lost
to
Azinger.
I believe that might be sort of the.
We had a few issues in that
some
match.
Relationship issues there, some early jitters.
Big time, because we
just
had
talk us about that week.
Well, we started very well, and we got 2 up quite early. But then we went to change the ball. He said, "Ian, change the ball," and he threw it to me. At that, Azinger said, "I want to see that ball."
Is that between the soft and the hard compression ball?
No, it was marked.
Right, okay, it's just marked differently.
When I looked at it, I thought, this ain't marked enough. And then Azinger says, "Ian, give me the ball." So I had to throw the ball to Azinger. I have to, because you can't not show him it.
And there was this huge rivalry, wasn't there, between them at the time?
So Azinger got hold of it, showed it to the ref, said, that's not marked enough. So Seve plonks it down, bang, straight in the hole. Then said, "Ian, change the ball." So that had set a little bit of a fraction there. Then Paul played really well, to be honest, and he came back at us, and we were all square. And then we got round, we've gone 10, 11, 12, the par 3. We're on the tee. And at this, Seve's first on the tee, and he goes to line up his shot, sets the club, and all of a sudden, Azinger's caddy plonks his bag down right next to the ball, literally a foot away from the ball. So Seve politely says, "Look, do you mind moving the bag away?" So he picks the bag up. He moved it about, if I'm being generous, an inch. So at this point, the little red flag comes up. The old Yorkshireman there grabs him, throws him off the tee. Now, he's 6'6". I'm only 6 foot. At that, he jumps back at me, and at that point, the good old British policeman steps in. "Are you having any trouble, Ian?" I said, "Oh, no, thanks. It's all under control."
So this is a fight, a semi-fight going on with Paul Azinger's caddy on the tee.
I don't mess about. If somebody starts to want to be clever,
Who backed down first?
He backed down. He got told to by Azinger. But then Seve said to me, because he knew I was a bit fiery, he said to me, "Just calm down now, Ian. Keep it under wraps. Let's get back to getting on." And of course, we went all the way around to 18, where Azinger's one up, and then the famous incident on the 18th, and I'm going to be right, probably out of order here even, because I'm going to rip Andy McFeet a bit. We're on the tee, and Azinger snap hooks it off the tee, across the trees and into the water. So then, next thing, McPhee's giving Azinger a drop in the trees. I says, well, and Seve's then blown up because he's seeing Azinger's getting a drop in the trees. Well, nobody in my whole lifetime, Ryder Cups, tournaments, has ever had a drop in those trees. They've all had to go at the dropping zone. But Mr. McPhee, in his wisdom, decided that's where he was going to allow the drop. And he wasn't even in there. So I can't tell you how he decided 100% where that ball crossed and where it went in the water, where he could take the angle for the drop. But he's managed to get a drop, he's got a perfect lie, and he knocks a wood into the bunker on the green. Well, Seve's gone ballistic, believe me. That was the most fearsome I ever saw him.
Into the bag.
And I couldn't calm him down. And I'm saying, look, try and... Anyway, hindsight would have been a marvellous thing now, because I reckon I should have switched the club on him, because he took a 4-iron and he come over the top of it and hit it in the water, if you remember. Yeah. And then... Then we hit it slightly long onto the green behind the thing, and I got the usual proverbial stuff. Well, you got another yardage wrong today. That's another one you've got wrong today. You know, his temper's really flying. Of course, he holds the putt down the hill, doesn't he, for 5, but Hassinger makes the same halves, and so Hassinger wins one up.
How angry was... I mean, Seve was pretty...
We stormed to the locker room after he ignored Andy McPhee. And to this day, I believe Andy McPhee, because I don't know whether he saw the interview that Seve did while he was Pooley, and he mentions an official that he always had a war with and a battle with, and that's who he was referring to. And I'm going to say quite openly, I think Andy McPhee cheated us that day. He cheated Europe and he cheated Seve.
I suppose it was that era in the Ryder Cup where...
So there you go, there's me being...
That's kind of where the partisanship sort of emerges. Great story, by the way, guys.
Yeah. And I believe that. I honestly believe that because, like I said, I don't think... If you watch them all, they were all taking drops in the drop zone when they hit it over. So one tried to play out the water that year, but nobody ever got a drop in those trees. And I've never seen anybody yet get a drop in those trees, even now.
Am I right in thinking, Ian, that your professional relationship with Seve finished quite soon after that?
Shoal Creek.
Shoal Creek, okay.
Yes, where we had one, special place, wasn't it?
Very hot. I was trying to think who won at Shoal Creek that year. Was that
Wayne Grady?
Wayne Grady. So what happened at Shoal Creek then? Why did the relationship
we've been having the problems. I'd survived one fallout, to be perfectly honest, and I'd said, look, I'll stay on. I was hoping to get him back on form, but we're having the problem. This ball's flying off any direction. I couldn't tell you what direction it was going, and he certainly couldn't tell me what direction it was going. And this went on for about 6 months. We'd managed to win a tournament at the beginning of the year, and I thought, oh, this might encourage him, but I stuck with him. But the vitriol started coming, you know. And I did eventually find out by the fact I caught him in the locker room one day, and he took his shirt off. And if you'd have seen his back, he had acupuncture. Now, if you know the thickness of a 6-inch nail, that was the holes going from the top of his back down to the bottom of his back. And that was the acupuncture he'd been having to try and fix his back because he was having serious back troubles. And this is what was the cause of all the problems with the swing. And he was told, actually, he was lucky. If he wasn't careful, he could have problems walking eventually. But anyway, the temper started flaring up, every bad shot. Anyway, we got to this par 3 in the second round at Shoal Creek, and we're going along quite all right, actually. I think we were at a +1 or level par at the time, so we're in great shape in the USPGA. And he left it on the front of the green on the par 3. So I dash up and I get the pin, take it out while he lines up the putt. Then I go and put it back in because he's just off the green. And he charges it some 20 foot past the hole. So then he charges it back past. Then he manages to hole it for 4, but then he starts. He rips into me loud and clear. That's your fault. You didn't take the flag out quick enough. Oh, well, it just went on. I said, whoa, stop right there. I said, don't talk stupid to me now. You've been saying some stupid things. Just calm down. We're in great shape for the tournament. Now just complete the round. Just knuckle down. Well, we just went to pieces. It came round to the 17th, which was the par 5. And the ground was a bit soggy and spongy. So he's laid up. We have a little pitching wedge on the green. He absolutely chunks it. He has a divot as thick as my soul, as my mum in shoes, you know, probably yours. And, of course, it starts again. Wrong club. You got it wrong again. Your distances are wrong again. I said, whoa. And it never stopped. And then he gave me some personal abuse. I'm not going to say what it was because I don't. I will never say what he actually did say. And I just said, right, stop there. We've finished. And I just said to him, I'm putting the bag down by the side of the green. When we get to the 18th, you better take it up yourself, because I'm absolutely not going to take that from you. So we finished the 18th. I left the bag there. I've gone up to the nearest beer tent, 3 Heinekens, please, and started drinking. And as I'm sat there, Lytham's caddy's there, and he said, "What's happened?" I said, "I've just quit." "Oh, it's happened, has it?" Because they all knew it was getting out of hand. They'd heard the stories, obviously. In the caddy world, it doesn't flies around. Anyway, the next thing, Seve comes back up to me, all apologies. He says, "Look, Ian, go and get the bag, and we need to talk about this." I said, "We're not talking about anything." I said, "I am finished." "No," he says, let's talk about it. So I go and get the bag. I calm down, I go and get the bag. But then I get the worst news. He's cancelled the Concorde flight. Now, I never got the fly Concorde, because we had Concorde tickets to fly back to the Belfry for the Open there. And he put us on first-class British Airways out that night. Well, I got absolutely ballistic on that plane. Good job they supply you with plenty of champagne, don't they? So I got ballistic, and then he starts quizzing me. "Who do you think I should have as the next caddy?" I says, "Well, you don't like guys that drink, so there's only 2 caddies I can recommend. You either take Andy Prodger, who's, in my mind, one of the great caddies, or was one of the greatest caddies.
He caddied for Faldo for many years.
He was Faldo's and KJ Choi's caddy for a long time. And... or you take Billy Foster, who's a new up-and-coming caddy, and I've heard very good reports from him, and he's always asking me for advice, I said, when he comes and has a chat with me and things, and he seems a pretty good straight guy. But he's another good Yorkshireman, I said, as well. That's the main point. So anyway, we left it at that. He says, "OK," and he says, "Look, we're going to go and try and go out with a win." And we nearly did. We got round to the 17th. We 1 shot off the lead. And in them days, they were building the corner of the 17th, and they put all these new little trees in.
Which course is this in?
The Belfry.
Oh, the Belfry, right.
And he put the ball straight behind a tree. And we just had to play outside. It was Mex 5. Birdie's the last. I believe we finished 4th, and that's how we finished. And I never spoke to him again. After the round, I just took Carmen sent me a message, "Take the bags. Will you bring the bag to the car, please?" And Carmen thanked me for everything, blah, blah, blah. And Seve just jumped in the car, went. And I spoke 2 words to him after that at the practice ground at Wentworth. The boys all cajoled me. "Ian, break your silence with him." So I went over to the practice ground, and I waited for him to stop talking to somebody. He turned round, I held my hand out, he tapped my hand, he said, "Nice haircut," walked away, and that was the only other words I ever spoke to him after.
Wow.
But then, he's what I and the caddies all laughed at. He sends me a letter, typed letter. Carmen sent me a beautiful handwritten letter thanking me and the wife for everything we'd done for them and how we'd looked after them and, made every effort. And he sent me a letter saying, "The reason I lost faith in you was because I didn't trust the yardages." And I'm the guy that did all the yardage books for everybody in the world.
Irony, isn't it?
And it was a sad way to end. He just couldn't say thank you for 2.5 years of, 1 major, 6 other victories. God knows how many seconds, thirds and fourths. And we were never out the top 10 hardly.
It's a really strange thing, isn't it?
And he went to world number 1. He went to won the Order of Merit, did everything, and yet he just couldn't accept to say something nice, and that's a sad way that it ended.
It's
there you go.
Ian, it's an amazing story listening to you talk about that with Seve, and it's like the roller coaster.
Yeah.
I suppose relationships don't come to an end.
But I'll tell you now,
always, do they? But
I would never ever say anything about his golf, though, because he was the most brilliant golfer in the world. Let's be honest. I mean, I had a year and a half of watching pure magic. I mean, it's a shots that half the players couldn't even think of, never mind play them, but he'd go think of them and then play them. And that was what's special about Seve. But the thing is, I always said one thing. Once he smiled, the whole world smiled with him, didn't it? You know, even now you look back and you think, there he is, Wentworth at the match plays, the whole crowd's egging him on.
He could make women go weak at the knees, couldn't he?
Eh?
He could make women go weak at the knees, couldn't he?
He certainly did, yes.
You and him had in common, isn't it, Dan?
Yes, he managed to, yes, do some amazing things. We don't talk about that side.
But it is incredible. I mean, you know, every caddy that worked for Seve said that it was a real double-edged sword in the sense that you knew you could be in contention, but you knew you'd get it in the neck. But you were there, you know, you were there to win an Open, and there's not many caddies that can say that. And I spoke to you about this earlier, about how that places you differently within the community of caddies when you've won a major. How did that feel for you, and how did that change your status within the caddy community?
Well, I think the one guy that came back to me was Vincent Fernandez. And he actually said to me, he said, there you go, I told you you're a good caddy. He says, but what I didn't tell you is you're a great caddy. That's why I recommended you for Seve. And that meant more to me than anything else, to hear somebody of that stature say to you that you've made it as a caddy. Because I did work hard, and the thing is, I still enjoy it now. I'm actually 74, and I still like to wander around with a bag on my shoulder if I get the chance.
Well, I was keen to ask you about that. I believe you still do a little bit of work up here at HQ, correct?
I do wander out occasionally with some people.
So you do still sort of do a bit of caddying now?
Yeah, and I'm going to do the... may as well own up. I'm going to do the Seniors Open qualifying on Sunday and Monday. I'm going to be working for an Italian guy over at Craig Law?
Yeah.
Is it where the qualifying is? Yes, Craig Law. I'm going to be working over there Sunday, Monday.
You still absolutely love caddying, right? It's less about the
just
person
brilliant.
you're with. It's more about the relationship and the nature of the role. And
I think the beauty of it is, like Petros, who's rang me, said, look, it'll be a privilege to have you on the bag. I said, don't be bloody stupid, I'm just a caddy. He said, look, will you come and work for me at the qualifying for the Seniors Open? I said, yeah, it'd be my pleasure. And that's what I'll do. I'll go and work for him. And I work for it. Oh, I've got a couple of... And we had the boss... The
sponsor day down here the other week.
Sponsors Day. Well, we had a group of players that never even had a golf club in the hand before. And I got this Spanish guy, of course. Well, he was made up. I was giving him lessons all the way around.
Bloody bet he was,
And
to be
when we
honest.
finished, he's posted a damn video of me telling me how helpful I was, and all this, you know. And he's actually sent it to Carmen.
That's pretty special, though, isn't it? You know, you come out of the ballot and the old course. You're thinking, I'm going to have a caddy because it's part of the whole experience.
Yeah.
And then this guy turns up and you say, I think I recognise you. Have you done a bit of this before? Yeah, I have. I've won an Open.
Just a bit.
Yeah, he was quite taken aback, but he was fantastic. And he sent me the video and a couple of pictures that we took on the way around and things. And he's right made up, yeah. And he wants a copy of the podcast, by the way. He's going to show it to Carmen, actually.
Well, it's fantastic stories, Ian. I mean...
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant stuff. And congratulations again on your 1988 Open Championship win. You are a major winner.
Thank you very much.
And can we, from those in the crowd as well, just a big hand, I think, you know, for Ian to come in and spend and share some of those stories with us today and just give this time. So big thank you from us, really.
If anybody... have we got 2 or 3 minutes?
Of course you have.
How about, does anybody want to ask any questions to me about
Great show.
the
Gentleman
time?
here on the
Because
left.
this might be quite useful.
What was the greatest shot that you saw Seve hit, is the question here.
Well, that's easy for me because it was at Wentworth in the match play. It was absolutely hissing down. You know the one with the little stream running across the bottom? He's hit it right there. Now, the wind's blowing about 45 miles an hour, and he's on the downslope in the ringing wet rough. He says, what do you like? Well, There's only one shot to me, chip out sideways. He takes a 4-iron on this wet, clingy lie, aims it without exaggeration, 80 to 90 yards left of the plateau green. Remember, it's a 2-tiered green, that one. And he cuts it off the slope into the wind, and it finishes pin high just on the fringe of the top plateau. That was one of the greatest shots I saw. I had seen the chip, obviously, for the Open, but that one always stands out in my mind because I can't dream of anybody even attempting a shot out of wet rough, clingy rough.
So many shots.
Any more
pleasure.
questions for Ian?
No.
Well, Ian, thank you so much. And,
Hold on, we got one more. Links on the road.
Sam Cooper. Oh, here we go. So if Seve was playing the game today with modern equipment,
I don't think
it
he'd changed the equipment that much. Do you know that? Because he was very traditional. And he had me looking for dino rod wedges in the waste bins, you know. Second.
So I guess
I don't. It sounds funny, but he didn't really change that much. His equipment. He stuck with his old 3 woods. He stuck with all he changed was the shafts mainly. He believes the only thing that mattered was the shaft. He was very adamant about 2 things in golf. One, 60-degree wedges was for people who wanted to learn to cheat because they can't learn to chip. And B, the long putters. He never wanted him in the game because when Sam brought... Now, he's Scottish story here. When Sam brought out that long putter, Seve went ballistic with him and he tried to get it banned. But I think that's a mistake in golf, personally. Myself, I don't see why people need long putters, and I don't see why you should have 60-degree wedges.
Ian,
why can't people learn to play chips like everybody? I mean, say Tony Johnson was another great chipper and bunker player. They didn't need 60-degree wedges.
Just expanding on that question, Ian, I suppose if Seve was teeing it up today in the 150th Open and, you know, he was born in a slightly different era, do you think maybe the equipment that's used today and his mechanics would still stay just as relevant? I think I probably know the answer, but
I think he'd just continue playing the course. You know, he managed the course. I don't think the equipment mattered to him really in that sense. Obviously, he had his favourite driver, his favourite 3-wood, and he certainly had the favourite wedge.
And multiple sponsors and different clubs that he had to hop between.
Can I ask you one more question? Was there any player that Seve not feared, because he didn't really fear anybody, but was there any player that he felt almost matched him for talent?
I suppose the one player he admired for bunker play was Tony Johnson, funny enough, who's unheralded great bunker player, great short game player. But I can't honestly say that he ever mentioned other players, really. I think he was sort of kept everything under the cap, so to speak, and he just made sure he was the best. I mean to say, we had one week where we'd had a terrible day out of bunkers, and when he came back 2 weeks later after we'd had a week off, I looked at his hands and they were all cracked and dry, and I could see they'd been bleeding. So I said to Carmen, what's happened? He said he hit 3,000 balls out the bunker at home to punish himself for the way he'd chipped the week before. That's the sort of bloke he was.
Yeah, I mean,
it's incredible.
That's obsessive behaviour.
Sorry.
Questions about coaches for those at the back of the room. So who coached Seve?
Was Mac O'Grady working with him at that time, or was that a little bit afterwards?
No, nobody actually really worked with him. He had his brothers, but what he did was he picked coaches' brains. Is about the best way to put it. They won't like it, me saying this, but he used them. He didn't always listen to their advice. He didn't always utilise their advice. But what he did was, I think he selected bits that might be useful to him. But he tended to work on his own style. And once he had to protect his back, he was then trying to find a way to protect his back with the coaches. That's when we had the issue with Mac O'Grady, as you said. We did actually go off to another course and spend the a day there with him. He's a very clever man. I actually rate Mac O'Grady. He's got a lot of
people say incredible human being.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's misunderstood, doesn't he? I don't know about his 50 books on golf, but he certainly did help Seve. But then Seve just went back to his own way.
I suppose finally, Ian, you had these seismic experiences with this man, ranging from getting it in the neck and getting the worst sort of volleys of abuse, but also seeing, one of the greatest talents ever to play this game. What are your overall reflections of that period and that experience with that man?
To be honest, I've got a bag full of photographs at home of all the tournaments. I've got videos of all the victories which I watch. And I look back and I think, people that have paid millions to do what I did. I was lucky enough to get on Seve's bag when he was playing the best golf of his career. I had a year and a half, and it was just a pleasure. And I was just the luckiest man in the world to be that man at the time, thanks to Vincent Fernandez for recommending me. And I'll always be ever grateful. It's something I'm glad I never missed. And I just still do miss in some ways. I do miss the old bugger.
Ian Wright, ladies and gentlemen, once again a big thank you.